two men came up dressed in black suits and said it'd be better for your health if you didn't talk about the UFO you had just spotted.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Monsters Lounge. I'm Jeni.
And I'm Tressa.
Yes, you are. I was just giggling because I just noticed the ghost drinking a coffee in the last clip there, and I think I've stared at that thing in the intro several times, and just now noticed that he was drinking coffee.
You don't really get the nuance. I get it.
The nuance is beyond me. It usually is.
Mm-hmm.
Tressa, not only did we have an amazing bonus episode last week.
Boy, was that fun.
Boy, wasn't it. We love Varla. She is tremendous. She is very, very tremendous, and big fan of hers. But we have exciting plans this weekend, too.
Oh, is that true? Oh, that's right. We are going to drive an insane amount to get to Missouri Paracon, everybody.
Yay.
Ooh, air horn, air horn. Hold on, I can do that. Hold on.
Wait.
Media
sound effects.
And then, here we go. Woo, woo, woo. Yeah, Missouri Paracon.
I knew that was a
great.
poor choice.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's going to be a good time. So as per usual, come talk to us. We enjoy it very much. We are so excited when people recognize us or want to chat with us, and especially photos. I've loved it when people come up and want photos with us. It's so much fun.
I'll only draw boobs on my autograph if you want them. Because I care.
You have signed autographs before. I have not.
Oh, you poor thing.
I know. I gotta work on
I know. That
drawing
was
boobs.
Gross.
Yeah, yes. I don't know.
You love to draw boobs. That's all you do all day. So
Constantly.
I feel bad.
Like in the library, they love it when I do that. Schools, they like that too. They don't. Oh, I have been asked to stay away from libraries. They don't let
that's
me in
why.
Yeah, that's why. Listen, this is also really exciting because of our guest tonight.
I know. So excited.
I know. We have been trying to coordinate schedules, and you know what? We have heard him speak on a couple of occasions. We have seen him at a couple of conventions, and Chad Lewis has to be one of the nicest human beings out there. Yes. And listening to him talk is just phenomenal. So for over 25 years, Chad Lewis has traveled the back roads of the world in search of the strange and unusual. From tracking vampires in Transylvania and searching for the elusive monster of Loch Ness, to trailing the dangerous Tata Duende through the remote villages of, guess where? Belize. And searching...
Did you just say that?
I did.
Like that?
I
the
did.
First try?
I did.
Oh my God,
I know. I'm getting better.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. In searching for ghosts in Ireland's haunted castles, Chad has scoured the earth in search of the paranormal. Chad has been featured on the Discovery Channel's A Haunting, William Shatner's Weird or What, ABC's Scariest Places on Earth, and Monsters and Mysteries in America, along with being a frequent contributor on Ripley's Believe It or Not Radio. With a master's degree in psychology, Chad has authored over 25 books on the supernatural and extensively lectures on his fascinating findings. The more bizarre the legend, the more likely is you will find him here. Or there. And here. Yay! Help me welcome Chad.
Yay!
Welcome.
Hi, Chad.
Thanks. Greetings from the back roads of Wisconsin.
Yes! Love it.
So
my favorite back roads. I don't know. Don't question me.
Okay, I'm not going to question you whatsoever. Chad, it is... The amount of knowledge that you have in your noggin is phenomenal, right? And one of my favorite things that I have ever seen is the vampire kit that you had at one convention. You just had a full-on vampire hunting kit. And it reminded me of the one that you see at Ripley's Believe It or Not.
Yes. And they're old looking. I usually make them out of an old cutlery box. If you've ever been to a thrift store and saw the old where you'd put your silverware and cutlery, and I'll rip it all out, put some velvet in there, and then you have a kit where you can fill it with whatever vampire hunting gear you want. And it's so funny because years and years ago in my hometown of Eau Claire, I was really tight with the radio station there. I would do Halloween stuff with them all the time. And they said, hey, we're having a big RV and boat show. Would you like to have a couple tables there for your books? And I thought, RV and like outdoor show? I said, sure, I'll do it. And at that time, they gave me 2 tables and I didn't have enough books to put on both. So I brought a bunch of vampire hunting kits that I made with me. And they outsold all my books combined. So all these men and women that were looking at RVs and boats, they'd pop over and say, I need this vampire hunting kit. And I did it as a kind of a gag almost, like, oh, I have this extra table and all these vampire kits. Let me get rid of some garlic here. And
listen,
and I
it's
sold
lots
them all.
of scouts. They need to be prepared if they're going to be camping in RVs. They needed those vampire kits.
That makes
totally logical.
Yeah, it makes me so happy and also frightens me a great deal at the same time. Like these people, you know, they're out presumably they're out camping and they're on the water a lot. And if they're seeing the need for it.
What do we not know?
Or do I figured I saved a couple dozen lives that day.
I believe that you did, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do what I can. I do what I can.
So one of the cool stories that I saw that I don't know anything about, which is, quite a few stories, but the Van Meter visitor. Okay. I had never heard of this thing. Can you please tell me about it?
Yeah, most people have never heard of it, although it's one of the weirdest legends you'll ever stumble across. So the basic story is in 1903 in a small town of Van Meter, Iowa. For 5 nights, the town was terrified by a giant 8-foot bat-like creature that had huge leather wings and could project light out of a horn on its head and erase memories and caused terror for 5 nights in this tiny speck of Iowa.
It just, what happened to it? It just disappeared. Like, he's like, I've done my work. I'm out.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's basically the best part about this is that for 5 nights, the newspaper covered the story of what was happening. And then eventually they trapped this thing in an old abandoned coal mine. And then they were going to debate what they should do to it, kill it, try to capture it, or whatever they were going to do. And then the newspaper just said, that's enough. We don't need to cover it anymore. Like a great Hollywood cliffhanger. They just left it there. And that's it. No other stories. Yeah.
Okay.
And then that was 1903.
Okay. Did the visitor have like a mole at that meeting where they're like, okay, this is what they're planning. We need to get out of town. Or was the newspaper like, we'll just like do this cliffhanger and then like next season, it's really going to blow their minds when we come back with this.
I wish that were the case because after that, there was no mention of it. Not just for the next couple weeks, but for the next 100 years. It was never anything where somebody was saying, hey, do you remember 2 years ago when that giant bat was terrorizing our town? Nobody said that whatsoever. It was just forgotten until my colleagues and I happened to re-dig up the story.
That's wild.
I know. I find that so good because, I mean, in my town, we still talk about the grocery store that used to be downtown that was torn down like 30 years ago. We still have little conversations in the neighborhood about that.
It was a great grocery store.
It really was.
Yeah, and people just seem to have forgotten it. Even when we went to town, and about half the people we spoke with kind of knew the legend or heard about it or just remembered, because at that time, some of the buildings were still there by this old abandoned coal mine where the creature was using it as its lair. And the buildings were still kind of there and really bad shape, but people thought it was haunted because kids would go out there, teenagers and college age kids would go out there and they would see things moving about and bricks flying on their own. So they forgot the story of the visitor and they just thought it was a haunted place to go and visit. And, nobody called it the visitor. In a lot of the old stories, it was just called like this monster of awful form or this winged monstrosity. They never had a name for it. So that was something my colleague Kevin Nelson came up with because we were driving back from Van Meter thinking, we need to do this as a book. This story is incredible. There's so many weird details to it. And we said, well, they never called it anything. What should we call it? And we went through names and Kevin said, well, what do we know about it? That it was in Van Meter and it visited them. So let's call it the Van Meter Visitor.
I like how they were like, oh, there's this haunting, but let's not reference the weird bat creature. Like,
well, everyone
that's
forgot.
Old news.
Yes. And
get us the ghosts.
I've never had such a difficult time digging up history of a certain spot as I did in Van Meter. The town was only about 1,000 people, 900 at the time. It's still just over 1,000 people today. And if anything, it has shrunk a bit because in 1903, they had several hotels and, of course, several saloons. And today, nothing of that nature. But the history would go into the library where they held the historical records of the town. And they didn't even have old photos of what the town looked like at that time. It was something out of the Twilight Zone. It really was.
Are we sure that place existed at all before you went there?
I know.
Are we sure that it's not populated entirely by
the Van Meter visitors?
Yeah, the visitors, and they're just wearing trench coats and hats.
It's something out of Stranger Things. I mean, we have stories here in Wisconsin. We have a story of this place called Doveland, where people online recently have been posting like, hey, has anyone heard of Doveland, Wisconsin? Because I had relatives that lived there, or people post a picture of their cousins or whatever wearing Doveland, Wisconsin t-shirts, and it's never been on any map. It's never existed. And people say, I remember going there as a kid visiting my great grandparents, but nobody's ever heard of it. So we have that kind of similar story. So maybe the same thing's happening in Van Meter.
Yeah, maybe the visitor is taking care of the Midwest and just wiping out everything. What? I've never heard about the Doveland
effect for towns.
Yes, exactly. And people in Van Meter, it wasn't as though they were just encountering it. These people were shooting at it with their guns. They were blasting it with everything they had. They were trying to drive it out of their community. So it wasn't as though people just kind of saw it at night and just no big deal, it's weird light in the sky. They were having pretty close interactions with it.
And it was making people lose their memory with its horn. Is that what was happening?
Yeah, I need more details on that. What?
Yeah. Let me just kind of backtrack a bit. So the first night, it started off pretty mundane. A traveler, U.G. Griffith, who was a businessman, coming home about midnight, 1 a.m., and he sees a weird ball of light on one of the buildings in Van Meter, and he slows down, thinking it's a robber or an intruder of some sort, and this ball of light disappears and then reappears on the other side of the street on that building in a matter of like a second. Some say it flew over there, and so the next day he's talking about it, and nobody really cares too much. It's a ball of light in the sky. They were familiar with airships and UFOs at the time. But the next day, a doctor is sleeping in his office when this thing wakes him up about midnight, 1 a.m., and he ends up blasting it. And next night, the bank...
Hold up.
I love how the doctor comes out firing.
Yeah. So, the doctor's awoken in the middle of the night by this light flashing in his office, because those days, most business people, which were men mostly, would sleep right in the building where their office was. That was their home and their office. So he's sleeping about 1 a.m., this bright lights flashing back and forth. He walks over to the window, and out on the main street of Van Meter, he sees this 8-foot bat-like thing with the light on its horn, and that what was shooting the light at him. So the newspaper said he grabbed his weapon of immense proportions and went out, of course, and he went out, and this is the town doctor. This isn't the drunkard or the town transient.
The trigger happy doctor that everyone knows.
Yeah, exactly. So he goes out and blasts this thing 5 times, saves his last shot for an emergency, goes inside and just barricades himself in till morning. And the next morning, the town's really split because now you have 2 knights, 2 witnesses, both upstanding members of the community. And the town was kind of split. Half believed it was a monster, and the other half thought it was a bank robber, an intruder, practical joker, whatever. Which you would think after being shot at, you would stop the practical joke, but
it just gets funnier every time.
It's never stopped Tressa ever. So.
Nope. Keep going.
So the third night, the bank manager, he falls in the category of, hey, these are robbers casing out our town. I'm going to leave my family at home unprotected. I'm going to grab my shotgun filled with buckshot, which is like a scatter shot, and go protect the town's money at the bank. So about 1 a.m., again, he hears the sound of somebody strangling, of some noise coming to the side of the building. And then all of a sudden, a bright light is flashing in the bank, and he sees this giant bird-like thing behind it. So he's terrified. He blasts out the front window of the bank, shooting at this thing. And then he barricades himself inside by the bank vault and waits for morning because the thing disappeared as soon as he shot it. The light was gone, everything. So he comes out the next morning thinking he's going to find a dead carcass or feathers, fur, blood, or the intruder out there dead on the ground, and there's nothing. The only thing he sees is on the side of the building are giant 3-toed footprints in the mud.
I like that.
Yeah.
And apparently they took a cast of it, and we've never found the cast.
Yeah,
but
I was going to say.
Yeah. So then now we're getting to the 4th night where the memory loss comes in, because on the 4th night, about 1 a.m. again, local businessman sleeping above his building when he hears the sound of like 2 big metal files being ground together. Ooh. Really irritating stuff.
Yeah.
So he wakes up, goes over to the window, and this creature is sleeping on a light post, a telephone post. They had the telephone even there. And he said it is sleeping there. So he let his eyes adjust, apparently. And as you do in Iowa, he took out his gun and shot it.
I'm sensing a pattern here.
Yeah.
Did he then barricade himself in his place until morning?
Oh, no.
Okay.
This gets better for him because he shot the thing, but it only woke it up. And the thing flashes light right on him. And then he said it released some powerful odor that when the scent hit him, it erased his memory.
What?
He couldn't remember anything else. Yeah, exactly. He didn't remember that part. So he's there, stupefied and out of commission, but his gunshot woke up a gentleman across the street, Sidney Gregg. And here's where it gets even more bizarre, because Sidney Gregg goes to his window and he sees this thing descending the telephone pole, but it's using its beak like it's a parrot going down, and it starts hopping around on 2 legs on the main drag of Van Meter. And then all of a sudden the fast mail, which was the train, came rumbling through town, and it must have spooked this thing. It started running on all 4s, spread its wings out, and flew off to the outskirts of town toward an old abandoned coal mine where factory workers were working right next door at a brick and tile factory. And so the next day they think that's where it's living. It's got to be in this lair out at the factory. So the townsfolk tell everyone to keep their lights lit all night long. And on the 5th and final night, a posse of all of the workers gathered all the weapons they could, and they go over to the mine, and they said it sounded like Satan and a regiment of his imps We're
What?
coming up from hell to wage war on Van Meter. So it's just getting dark and the thing comes up, but this time there's a twist to the story. There's a
you know
second
what?
one.
I was going to have you wait till after this break.
Those of you naysayers, I want you to know how much I appreciate how many of you grabbed a hold of my small package after last week's show. It is out and available. You can get both of my books, The Other Side, A Guide to the Paranormal and Ghost Hunting, and my brand new book, Theater of the Mind, Tales from the Darkness. Both books are out. One, of course, kind of a how-to ghost hunt book, and the other story book of strange supernatural occurrences all around the world. You can get your hand on my small package by just ordering it right off of my website. You can go right to paranormal60.com, scroll down on the front page there, or go to the shop and scroll down and you'll see our book bundle. And I was so humbled by the fact of how many men put their hands on my small package at the end of last week's show and bought it. It was great. It made me feel loved and wanted. I'm not going to lie.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah.
There was a second one?
Yeah.
Tell us.
Cliffhanger was there was a second one. But
You
it
didn't
was
have to wait the next season for my cliffhanger. Keep going.
So this one's smaller, maybe the female gender, an offspring, who knows, but together they fly off, and what they did that night, nobody knows. But just before daybreak, they came back, and that's when everybody had gathered with all their weapons. And the newspaper said they shot at these things with enough ammunition that they could have sunk the Spanish fleet. But I don't know if these were the worst shots in Iowa or this thing was impervious to all weapons because it had no effect. These two simply descended into the coal mine. And like I said earlier, that's where the story left off. They said the townsfolk were trying to figure out a plan to deal with them. And then they got busy with the town city council meetings or something. I don't know.
Right.
And they just, that's it. That's where the story ended. Until we picked it up, 15 years ago or whatever it was.
I mean, yeah, you picked it up, but you didn't finalize it. How does it end? Where did they go?
No conclusion. No conclusion.
So we went out
whatsoever.
to the farm where the family owns the farm now, that where the brick and tile factory was and where the mine was. And the mine had been closed up, but nobody knew exactly when or how or why. It had just been closed up for decades, and you couldn't even tell it was there when we were standing on the property. And the old time farmer, who was a salt of the earth type guy, didn't like any of this flights of fancy stuff. He was like, here's where it was. We think this is where it was. And he said, even though I don't believe in any of this, when I was a kid, I never enjoyed playing around the mine area.
Ooh.
Just something about it threw him off. And again, this wasn't your typical paranormal enthusiast.
Right.
He could care less about it. So that was pretty fun, but we never got to answer the question of, did they kill it? Is it still there? Did it fly off to become the Mothman of Point Pleasant? No idea. In terms of that part of the story, that who knows what they did with it.
So you are here to announce your GoFundMe to open up that mine, right? Right.
We're going on an expedition, everybody.
A couple years ago, I did an episode on Expedition X or whatever their new show's called. And they were there and they hired a backhoe to come in, and we were able to get them permission from the farmer's family. And they dug for a little bit and found some old boards. It might have been the opening of the mine. But this was a gigantic mine that people don't realize Iowa was a big coal producer. So this mine was hundreds of feet deep, miles and miles of tunnels. They had teams of donkeys and other mules down there. So it was a huge thing, but it's probably flooded completely out over the years, or it's not stable, because that's the number one question from people. Why don't you just start digging and let's go down in that mine and see what's there? And I would love to, but there's no way that they'd ever probably let anyone do that. But they did dig a good 8 feet down for the show.
So you're saying do it under the veil of night when nobody knows, is what you're saying.
You know,
That's exactly right.
I am dive certified, so we could get down in there in the water, and then you can all mourn my death.
Where in where in Iowa is Van Meter located approximately? Like middle, east?
Yeah,
west,
about 20 minutes south west of Des Moines.
Okay.
So
okay.
Tiny little town. It's slowly becoming a suburb of Des Moines, and eventually Des Moines will swallow it up. But as for now, it's its own little town. And like I said, if anything, it's a sleeper community for Des Moines.
Nice.
I love this story so much.
It's so good. It's so fun. Because, you got Point Pleasant and you're like, and then there's a Mothman and he showed up for a couple days and but nobody was like shooting at him, and they got a whole movie out of that guy.
This really would be a cowboys versus aliens type thing.
It totally would be.
Or dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Ooh.
So, Chad, you have so many books out, and I'm a big fan. I have 2 or 3 of them, one of which is one of my favorite books, paranormal books, which is the Wendigo, and we won't go into that, but so much research. So please, everybody pick it up. But you have a new book coming out in June?
Yes. The pun is it'll ghost ship out on June 1st because it's on Lake Superior and there's tons of ghost ships there. And yeah.
There's tons of everything. I had no idea until I was looking at it that, again, I always say I have no idea. Sometimes I have a little bit of an idea. Sometimes I have more of an idea. But it just seems a better choice to say I had no idea. So you got ghost ships. You have hauntings, especially of lighthouses. There's cryptids up there. What is your favorite? Yes. Give us a couple of your favorite stories from Lake Superior.
I absolutely love Lake Superior. It's my favorite of the Great Lakes by far, and probably the weirdest. And a lot of people don't know it's basically an ocean. It's gigantic. By volume, it's bigger than all the other Great Lakes combined. It's just humongous. And all sorts of weird things, from obviously haunted lighthouses and ghost ships, but there are stories of UFOs over the water, in the water. One of my favorite stories is of mermaids in Lake Superior.
What?
Yes.
Give me that. Give me all of the mermaids, please.
Yeah. So the story of mermaids, at least in a written form, oral tales may go back even further, but written form go back to the 1700s when some French pioneers and explorers were traveling along Lake Superior, and they had made it to an area near Thunder Bay, Canada, just north of the North Shore of Minnesota. And there was a Pie Island, it was called. So they're camped out on the side of the lake, and they're waiting, they're traveling. They have a guide, an indigenous woman that's guiding them through the area. So their base camp is on the side of the lake. And just before dark, they look out toward the island. They can see what appears to be from the top a really heavily tanned young boy sitting on a rock, but the bottom is what your typical mermaid would be, the fish scales and the tail. And they're sitting there, and unable to believe this of what they're seeing with their eyes, and it's getting dark. So the main traveler pulls out his gun. He's going to shoot this thing because he's thinking, no one's going to believe I've seen a mermaid.
I gotta kill it.
Yeah.
I better kill it and take it home.
And he pulls his gun up and takes aim, and their guide kind of pushes the gun away before he fires and warns him, saying, we think these things are supernatural beings, that they have powers, that if any harm comes to them, they will bring terrible weather upon us, storms, deadly waves. So we do not mess with them. And of course, the French pioneer just kind of scoffs, thinking it's superstition from long time ago. And
I love that. Hey, there's a mermaid, but you're being crazy with your superstitions. You get out of here.
Now let me shoot it.
So they're trapped there for the next several days because huge storms come in. And we don't find out about this story until the 1800s, when one of the people on the expedition writes about it in a Canadian magazine at the time, of testifying in court about what he had spotted of the mermaid. And throughout the years, people claim that their mermaids are still out there. And more importantly, they almost conflate them with the old siren stories, because they talk about these mermaids trying to entice you into hitting the rocks and drowning, that much like sirens calls we're doing. So there's stories of the mermaids, and people at Lake Superior just joke about it, saying, don't try to shoot them or harm them because our weather's already fickle enough. We don't want to add to our misery with the weather. So there are stories of the mer people being up in Lake Superior.
I had no idea. That's fantastic. Why was there a court case about it? Why was he testifying in court? That's my takeaway.
Yeah, he was testifying about the story to it being authentic, and they thought the best way would be under oath in a court of law. Those Canadians are odd ducks anyway. So so that mermaid, that's one of my favorite ones on there. But I've done programs, lectures up and down the entire lake, and everyone I did, especially on the lake shore of Minnesota, on the North Shore, it's called, it goes up from Duluth all the way up to Thunder Bay, Canada. And everyone I talked, people would come up and say, yeah, we've seen UFOs over the lake all the time. And they say, but more importantly, we would see them in the water, balls of light and craft moving about under the water, and then like coming out of the water, and as though the water's not even there. No splash, no ripples, nothing. Just like it's just coming in and out on its own.
Just like in the North Pole.
I was going to ask, like, is that similar to the stories that we hear
from the ocean?
Yeah.
In general?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And people, they were saying it's so calm and normal, like it's an everyday thing there, that you could just go out to the water and see these lights maneuvering about. And when I asked them, were you taking video? Were you trying to decipher what was going on? They're like, no, we were just out on our walk and saw these lights, and then came home and kind of, went about our business.
Made a hot dish.
Yeah.
Those are some of the most believable stories to me, where people just kind of like, it's so common that they're just like, oh yeah, no, that's totally like what Debbie down the street saw. Anyway, what do you want for dinner?
Right.
Well, and it brings up the whole abduction scenario stuff, where these people who believe they've been abducted, when they get home and they're missing time and families wondering where they were, they have no desire to talk about it whatsoever. They want to go to bed. They want to forget it. They don't want to talk about it. So maybe unconsciously the same thing's happening with some of these witnesses, that they're just not even touching it.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's some sort of trauma response? Sorry, Tressa, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, my thought over the last 30 years of doing this, and my background's actually in the field of psychology. I ended up doing my bachelor's and master's in that field. And I don't think it's like a defense mechanism. I don't think they're consciously doing this. I personally think there might be something blocking it from them. or not allowing them, and maybe putting in the screen memory that we all hear of. That I had a woman in the Northwoods of Wisconsin who had been having a lifetime of experiences of beings coming to her house and taking her, to their craft and that. And when she was undergoing hypnosis with Dr. Tom Franklin and myself, she talked about owls around her house being 5 foot tall. And Dr. Franklin would question her saying, tell me more about this 5 foot owl. Have you ever seen an owl that big? And she said, no, I guess that doesn't make sense. And, she was describing a gray, your typical gray being with the almond eyes and the oval head and that. But she had the screen memory that you're just seeing owls. That's all it was. So maybe that's the same thing.
Yeah,
What
I
do you
feel
guys
like
think?
I've heard owls being a placeholder for aliens at a lot of experiencers' just descriptions, and that's fascinating. And they don't question it; they're just like giant owls.
Yeah, I think I've heard that even from like way back, like years and years and years. Why do I feel like I saw that on Unsolved Mysteries or something? But like it's pretty common, right?
Yeah, and you brought up the Wendigo stories earlier, and with Wendigo encounters, they always feared the owl, thinking it was either one, a spy for the Wendigo, or two, it was the Wendigo that would shapeshift into the owl and come spy on a community, a town, or a village, or a tribe, and then be able to know when to attack and when to devour people. So yeah, owls, there have been a lot of books done on, they're not just owls, and they're, harbingers of something else. So I find it fitting that abductees often, and it's not just owls, sometimes they'll talk about giant squirrels, or they'll say some deer came into my backyard the other night and started talking to me, and as though that's normal.
Yeah,
but
that's fine.
I've heard the deer thing, but wait, let's reverse to this giant squirrel thing.
Well, you'll start to see a pattern of these screen memories or false memories that abductees have of when you look at, if you were put a depiction of a deer or a photo of a squirrel and an owl, the big eyes are what usually stands out to people. And I think it's just easier for them to, and it doesn't even occur to them to think, yeah, I've never seen a 5 foot squirrel or a 4 foot squirrel. But it's so amazing sitting watching these people under hypnosis go through these stories, because you can see it literally just dawned on them that squirrels are not 4 feet tall.
It's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, who doesn't automatically? Nope. It's so fascinating what the brain will do to just like piece out of the situation. Come on, I love it. We're going to go to a break right now, but I have a question about underneath Lake Superior that I don't know that you even touch on, but I got a question in just a second.
Oh, hey, Tressa. Jeni? Oh, I'm just reading my book by international TV sensation, Dave Schrader. I'm reading the book, too. I don't remember the name of it or who wrote it, but yeah. There, I like your shirt. You? I got it on monstersloungepodcast.com. You've got a great shirt, too. Oh, this? That's so weird. I got it at monstersloungepodcast.com, too. They have really great stuff. A full variety. I know, right? They have everything. Shirts. Tote bags. Clutches. A phone case, I think. It's the best.
We gotta get
like during the break, seeing Jeni clutch her face in, I don't know, disgust.
No, we just
enamored,
gotta.
I don't know.
It's all of the. I love it, and yet I think that it's time for a new one. I feel like.
Yes, agreed. So my question is, has anyone done a deep dive in Lake Superior? Maybe trying to find out where these UFOs are coming from, or I don't know I forget what the UA, whatever they are when they come from under the water. or anything fun and ancient on the bottom of Lake Superior?
Yes and no. Obviously, Lake Superior is very deep. It's very cold. It's dark. But most of the people that are there diving, they're shipwreck diving
Oh, that makes
because
sense.
hundreds and hundreds of ships have gone down and met their watery grave in the icy waters of Lake Superior. So it's mostly ship divers or ghost ships that people are going to explore. And oftentimes there have been a lot of wrecks where divers will see lights down there as though other divers are there before them, but they know they're specialized divers. They're trained divers to be able to do this. So they know there's no one else down there, but yet they see lights. But oftentimes those lights are attributed to ghost lights, the hauntedness of the ship rather than UFOs. And
Right.
maybe that's what people are seeing. I don't know.
I mean, it sounds like ghost lights. Sounds like that whole lake is just haunted. So, yeah, there's going to be ghost lights all over that place. You kidding me? Yeah.
And people have a really strange attraction to Lake Superior that a lot of people who go there for the first time and see it think, I belong here.
Oh,
I
wow.
can't believe I've never been here. I need to move here. They're really attracted, or they'll say, I'm coming back here every vacation that I can get. So Lake Superior has this really eerie draw that it has on people. And the effect is just amazing that unlike any other lake I've ever seen.
That's wild.
I love that question, and I love the stuff about the divers too, because you're right. Like, those are very specialized divers. They do a lot of time in the water. There's like 2 different certifications you need to get in addition to your normal certification. So like wreck diving and like deep dive, which is you're using a different blend of oxygen. So like these people have seen things before. Shut up. I'm talking
Jeni
about
knows
diving. It's
diving.
fine. I love it. I love it so much.
Oh, it's great. I just got hooked on The Rescue, the documentary. Have you seen that?
Mm-mm.
Of the cave divers that were able to get
Oh, I heard about that.
in Thailand, the soccer team that was,
Yeah.
I think you'd love it as a diver.
Yeah, okay. It's going on the list right
It's
now.
called The Rescue.
The Rescue. All right.
Yep.
I'm on it.
It's on Disney Plus and any streaming, whatever.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, about those crazy divers.
Yeah, no, but like they're very serious people, so they're not making things up. They're going to check things out and you know, clearly anything that would be preventative
It's like when
too.
It's like when law enforcement reports something paranormal or weird, you just trust them a little bit more because they're not going to say something that's going to make them be ridiculed.
Yeah.
They're going to tell you what happened.
Yeah, that's another thing
I
too,
remember.
right? Like a smaller community.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember in the old days, it was if a police officer, a pilot, a firefighter, men and women that were trained to be observers, if they saw something, it automatically had more credibility.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rather than, again, the town gossip or the town drunk of that nature. And that forever, that was the paranormal stereotype that the person living out in the boondocks by themselves drinking in a trailer, they were seeing UFOs. And I think that's been dispelled quite a bit in the last couple of decades.
It's definitely shifting for the better.
Absolutely. What other things do we have going on? Give us another story from Lake Superior.
Sure. I mean, the hardest part for me was what to leave out in terms of there's so many ghost ship stories that after a while they get a bit just kind of boring, if that makes sense. That so I wanted to throw in stories that people might not be familiar with and stories that I think are fascinating. For instance, there's a small town just north of Duluth called Two Harbors, Minnesota. And after a program, a woman came up to me and said that she was up there just watching the lake, hanging out, and saw this craft, this UFO out above the water, but just hovering there. And there's some people next to her and they're talking amongst one another saying, are you seeing what I'm seeing? And they watch this UFO for maybe 30 seconds, 45 seconds. It seems to be a fairly large craft, but it's out a bit and then it's just gone. just out of their eyesight. And she wasn't really interested in UFOs, but her son was a UFO enthusiast. So she was very excited to go home and tell him the story of this UFO.
He
So
was
she's
so mad at her.
So she's walking back to the parking lot, and she doesn't even get to her car. And she said 2 men came up dressed in black suits and said basically that it'd be better for your health if you didn't talk about the UFO you had just spotted. And she thought it was weird because not only had she not told anybody about the UFO sighting, she hadn't even made it back to her car yet.
Oh my God.
So this
And she was in perfect health. What are you talking about, you big dum-dums?
So she goes home and tells her son about the UFO, and then, oh yeah, these strange guys. And he's thinking, you've never heard of Men in Black, Mom? And
There's a whole movie series.
Yeah.
Wait, when did this happen? What year
some
was
music
this?
behind it and all that. But so he starts telling her about these Men in Black, and she's looking it up and thinking that's exactly the type of person that these 2 people were. So she sees these Men in Black, and they, threaten her. And obviously the threats didn't go through because she was able to talk about it and tell me the story. But I found that just fascinating, that because for one thing, up in the North Shore of Minnesota, people aren't wearing suits. It's the North Woods.
Yeah.
It's lakeside. You're either in shorts or you're in the most comfortable clothing that you have. I mean, it's not a fashion capital of the United States. So people aren't in suits at all. I mean, I used to present years ago in a full suit, and people thought I was crazy. So, that got out just because you didn't fit in. The likelihood of these Jehovah Witnesses walking around with her, and I don't know, but I thought that was amazing of her Men in Black story in Two Harbors there.
That's so great. I rarely get to hear a Men in Black story where I'm like, that's just fun. Because she didn't even have any idea what it was. I love that.
Yeah. Much less like make it anywhere to tell anyone ever, oh, that's so wild. Have you
those Men in Black were bad at their job. She told the story.
Bad.
Her health is fine.
Bad. She is doing A-okay. Chad, have you ever had experience with the Men in Black?
No.
No, tell a lie.
Have either of you?
No.
But I did have, we used to do these conferences in Eau Claire every year, and they were big conferences on the paranormal every October. And my colleague Linda Godfrey, the late Linda Godfrey, she would do them with us. And there was one, I didn't notice this, but there was a guy, my colleagues told me after, that there was a guy in the front row that had dressed in a suit, and he had a briefcase, and he was recording everything. I didn't notice him, but they thought he was really weird the entire time. And then he came up after and started talking to them, asking the most mundane questions and the weirdest stuff, but I didn't see him. So
he could have been a cosplayer. I don't know.
Yeah, could have been. Yeah, exactly. So who knows? But no, I've encountered a lot of weird people, but none that I thought were Men in Black or women in black even.
Right. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I would think the researchers would encounter them more, right? Because you're in there and sort of poking around,
researching.
Yeah, I guess that's the definition of researching.
Bumping into these people wherever you are, and
getting their stories.
Yeah. So, and unfortunately, I didn't get a lot of the details from her. That she didn't pay attention to whether they were driving a car or how they got there or what they were doing, or if they talked to somebody else, because she was kind of thrown off and just got in the car and went home. She didn't want to investigate it, obviously, because she thought it was just odd. She didn't know about the Men in Black, but I really wish she would have been familiar when she could have gathered all of these other details.
Yeah, but if she was familiar, she might have been too scared to actually pay attention. She would have been like,
True.
Yeah, I would have been focused on. Yeah, there we go. Shot someplace in Iowa.
Yeah, that's right.
You just unlocked it.
So I love that story of Lake Superior as well.
That's a fascinating one. That's so good. I would be terrified. All of this would be terrifying to me. Now, as far as more cryptids, because I'm always going to want to hear about those, do we have any more cryptids going on in Lake Superior?
So when we get past Thunder Bay, and Superior makes a big loop from Minnesota up to Canada, through Michigan, back through Wisconsin. And once you get past Thunder Bay, Canada, the loop around the lake is just desolate. I mean, we think we have Northwoods here in Wisconsin and Minnesota in the Midwest, but Canada shows us how to really do it because it's just sparse. There's nothing there. Tiny little specks of towns. They don't even have a giant touristy town, around Superior. So a lot of these legends are spread out and they're not well known. So unless you're in that community and talking to residents, you're probably not familiar with them. In fact, so much so that one legend that I just made it to last summer, it was a Puckasaw National Park in Canada. It's about midway around Lake Superior, and it's this beautiful national park there. But I had been there almost 20 years prior doing some Bigfoot research, never knowing that there's also Wendigo stories there.
Oh.
So it wasn't until my trip last summer where I was able to gather up those Wendigo stories of this thing being on the edge of the lake in the winter when times of starvation settles in. So that's how tight knit these communities were, where when I was up there 20 years earlier collecting Bigfoot stories and legends, nobody even brought it up to me. And I had no idea there were even Wendigo stories, but apparently there's a bunch of Wendigo sightings at this national park in Canada. And the national parks around there are not like you think of Yellowstone or Yosemite. They're not that well known and populated and heavily visited. You don't get millions of visitors. So you can go to Puckasaw and see maybe 20 people there. It's that secluded. So it didn't surprise me that I had been there and hiked the entire park without ever hearing a Wendigo story. But just recently, I talked to some researchers who had discovered some Wendigo accounts there. And that put a whole new perspective there when I was there because, it has a different feel.
Oh,
because for
absolutely.
me, the Wendigo's the scariest
Yeah.
creature ever
100%.
of all time for me. Yeah.
It's that and Skinwalker for me. Like those are the
Yeah.
two top where I'm like, those are terrifying. No, thank you.
Yes.
But also
When
tell
you
me
were
all
there-
of the information.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Mhm. When you went there 20 years ago and you were investigating Bigfoot and no one mentioned Wendigos, was it like, oh, he didn't ask about that, so we won't tell him? Or was it like, you're an outsider, you don't get this information right now?
Probably a combination of both. What I found over the years is that when you ask somebody about something, whether it's ghosts or anything, they'll usually reply to that question. So you could say, we'd always do this when we'd go into a bar or a restaurant and ask people about local legends, especially if we knew of one in the area. We'd say, do you know anything about that cursed chair out at the cemetery? And oftentimes they'd say, no, never heard of that. And in the beginning, that was the end of it for us. We'd like, okay, we'd move on to someone else. Where over the years, we started to realize that when you broaden it out, and you ask about that chair and someone says no, and then you say, well, do you know of any other local odd stories or anything out of the ordinary? They'll say, well, yeah, actually, what about that crop circle that appeared outside of town? But if you wouldn't have opened it up, they would have just literally answered the question you gave. So I found that over the years, better questioning led to more examples. Plus, in Canada, there's still a lot of First Nations people and Indigenous people there where they tend to be a little more hesitant to share with outsiders. So be not knowing your intentions or what you're
That's
going to
fair.
do with it. So sometimes it just takes a while of being there. Or I've had people open up just because they saw I was sincere about it. Like in Pipestone, Minnesota, they have the Pipestone National Monument. It's where a lot of native cultures quarry to get the stone, the red stone, for their ceremonial pipes. And they also believe the little people are there, little gnome-like people, the tricksters, and they don't usually talk about them. But I ended up chatting up this woman who is a stone carver there. They're the cultural ambassadors. They carve the stone and answer questions about the significance of it and why they're doing it and the importance. And I started talking to her about the little people. And normally they would hush, but I think after just chatting with her, she saw I was very interested. I took it seriously. I wasn't disrespecting the legend. And she ended up opening up, her and her mother, about their encounters with the little people there.
Wow.
And this was in a matter of just a couple hours. So I found that the more time you can spend with someone, the better. But if you don't have that time, if they can read you as being professional or very sincere, that tends to help as well.
People can read your intent. If you're being disingenuous, they can tell.
Well, I'm also
Sure.
wondering if the background in psychology helps, right? Because you spend a lot of time being someone that people could trust.
Yes. I mean, I spent a lot of time just going through, I would record all my interviews, of course, and I would listen to make sure I wasn't doing any leading questions or trying to cut them off. For instance, with a UFO, you might just say, what color was it? Thinking that's a good question. But what I learned is that by saying that, what color was it? If somebody said there wasn't a color, in their mind, they're thinking, well, maybe there has to be a color because they're asking what color it was. So
Right.
I quickly shifted from what color was it to, was there a color to it? And just those little things you don't think of, but you just learn over the years of and you learn kind of the opposite of what we were saying of how people can read you. You kind of pick up on people, of whether they're being honest or embellishing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But sometimes I'll give you a quick example. I know we're running low on time, but after a conference, a gentleman came up to me and my buddies and said, you have to come to my property. I have several Bigfoot creatures on the property. You have to come see them. And this was 9:30 at night. And we said, great, let's go. And he said, well, you might not be able to see them.
Okay.
And I said, well, why not? He said, well, they're in a different dimension, but I still thought, let's go. I'll give it a try. And he said, well, they're probably busy. They like to have pool parties and barbecues. So
they've got doctor's appointments tomorrow, all of them.
Too busy.
Pretty tired.
So he ended up not bringing us there. I still would have went, because I think when you're dealing with the weird, what's too weird?
Yes.
Well, also,
where do you draw the line?
Who doesn't want to see Bigfoot having a pool party with all of his pals? I mean,
hello.
Exactly.
You bring a hot dish and you will be welcomed. Yeah. It's fine.
Yeah,
get out of here.
S'mores. It's great.
Yes. Listen, we got to wrap this up. Chad, tell us all the places that people can find you and whatever you want to plug. Go for it now.
Best place to find me is go to the weirdest legend you've ever heard of. Drive out there, and that's where you'll find me.
That's beautiful.
Guaranteed to see me there.
He's not wrong. I've been to many places, and he's just there taking notes.
Yeah,
it's great.
That's how we got this interview. We were just like, all right, where's the strangest place we can think of?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Well,
so there you go.
Do you have a website as well?
Yeah, people can just Google me. You'll be flooded with too much stuff. You'll be trying to avoid me, but yeah.
And we'll have all of those places you could be flooded at in the show notes, so you can find him there. And don't forget, he's got his new Lake Superior book come out in June. Thank you so much, Chad. I'm so glad we finally got to do this.
Yes.
It was delightful. You are a gentleman and a scholar.
Both
Everybody else! Thank you for joining us, and you should contact us and buy our merch and stuff. Okay, bye!
Yay!